Married couples of Reddit, what should every non-married couple know before tying the knot? Talk. Schedule dates and time where you disconnect from kids, work, and other responsibilities. Do not be afraid to hurt each other's feelings. If your spouse is doing something that annoys you, let them know. If you don't voice it, it can't be addressed. Talk about finances and long-term goals early on. Kids do not fix marital problems. Edited to add, I believe marriage is a lifelong commitment and that most problems are fixable. I think a lot of marriages fail because couples aren't prepared to do the work. Marriage isn't fire and forget, you have to take care of it. If you leave your dog at home all day, don't be upset at it for on the rug. Do not be afraid to hurt each other's feelings. Yes, absolutely. But do not go for the kill when arguing, where one, in the heat of the moment, and to score an easy point, attacks the person where they are the most vulnerable. I keep and maintain a list of things my wife is sensitive about in my mind, and while I do not avoid them completely, I know to be gentle in regards to them, so that we can have a productive argument rather than just yelling at each other. I hesitate to quote Dr. Phil, but he said something that I always thought made sense. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Sometimes you have to ask yourself if it's really worth arguing over. And saying I'm sorry, regardless who is right or wrong, goes a long way. Communications is so critical. People really should talk openly with each other about their expectations before they get married. The finances is also often overlooked and was something I didn't think about until it was brought up in our premarital counseling sessions. I'm so glad this was brought up and we had a discussion about it, because our assumptions about how we were going to handle this topic were way off base. This wasn't actually a problem, because we were able to talk it out and get ourselves on the same page, and it's never been an issue since. I'd say, it's important to be open and honest with each other before you get married, and talk about everything and anything. Don't be afraid to hurt each other's feelings. It's easier to talk about and try to resolve potential issues or touchy subjects before the wedding than after. First, know what communication is. Everybody will tell you communication is key. While this is true, nobody ever tells you what communication really is. So a married couple could spend 5 years together, never fight, never argue, just exchange pleasantries, talk about their days, go out on dates, etc., and then suddenly one of them reveals they're unhappy and want a divorce. And the other person will be very hurt and especially very confused. Because they did everything people told them to do in order to have a healthy marriage. They went on dates. They had that alone time. They asked each other about their day. They exchanged I love yous every night. So how does a marriage fail when you do all the things everybody says you're supposed to do? Because people told you what you're supposed to do, but they never told you how to do it. And this is especially true with communication. Everybody will say just communicate. Just communicate. But if you don't know what it is, you can't just communicate. Talking about your day, discussing the bills, and saying I love you is not communication. That's talking. There is a difference between the communication and talking. Talking is just making noises at each other without any real consequence to what you're saying. Communication is relaying your inner feelings to your partner, regardless, and this is the important part, regardless of how you think it will make your partner feel. Communication is talking about the bad stuff. It's talking about the stuff you don't want to talk about. You don't communicate in a marriage because you want to, you communicate in a marriage because you need to. A marriage where you never leave your comfort zone is a doomed marriage. Now, don't get me wrong, communication isn't all negative. I'm just saying communication means you share everything about your emotional state with your partner. If they do something you don't like, you need to talk to them about it, and likewise them to you. A lot of the time, something will bother you only because you're keeping it bottled in, and after bouncing that thought off your partner, you could find that it doesn't even bother you anymore. How you communicate these things is also important. There's no need to have angry outbursts and shout at your partner for every slight or wrong. You can calmly tell them about it, and use phrases like when you X, I feel why. It's important to avoid using blame phrases like you make me feel why. Be calm, clear, and concise about how that activity is making you feel. Make it clear that overall you still love them, if that is the truth, but you're just informing them of how that action causes you to react emotionally. Maybe they'll stop doing it. Maybe they'll argue that it's unreasonable to expect them not to do it. But like I said, you may even find that just telling your partner about it makes it not seem so bad on its own. Communication is absolute, unbridled honesty. And it requires you, first and foremost, to have the ability to be honest with yourself. People engage in all kinds of self-deception. They don't communicate with their partners because they're not communicating with themselves. They're not even admitting how they really feel about something. Fear is what keeps couples from communication and what keeps people deceiving themselves. Fear that they might have made a huge mistake and what that might mean. Imagine, you've lived with someone for 5 years, you've tried to make it work. You have kids together, a life. You deceive yourself because admitting the truth means facing a very difficult time in your life. To fight that, you need to realize that self-deception only works for so long, and those difficult times coming up ahead are unavoidable, so you might as well get them over with now before you get yourself into an even worse situation. The other thing to know, it's not your spouse's job to make you happy. It's not your spouse's job to make you happy because it is nobody's job to make you happy. Of course, that doesn't mean you don't purposely do things that the other person reacts favorably towards, but I'm talking about the inner sense of happiness. The kind that isn't necessarily swayed by one or two external actions. If you're a depressed person who doesn't get help, and you marry someone because a part of you thinks that you will be happy if you get married, that rush of endorphins and the newness of the situation might give you enough to be happy in the short term, but eventually, the depression will come back once things have settled in, and you'll see your partner as a failure because you're married and you're still not happy. Nobody in this world is responsible for your happiness but you. Even when you're married. There's a book my aunt, who's a therapist, made me go through and it was amazing. It's called The Hard Questions by Susan Piver and it's just a list of questions for you to go through as honestly and as in-depth as you can with your partner. I highly recommend everyone go through it. I've given mine away, but some of the questions that I thought were very valuable were: would we have a joint account or separate accounts? If it's a joint account, how much must we contribute to it? Who would pay for what sort of expenses? What kind of purchases require the approval of the other party? What happens if one party can no longer contribute? What are you open to in the event of infertility? Sperm donation? Egg donation? Adoption? Surrogacy? IVF? Who can stay over, and how long can someone stay over at our place? Are there any exceptions, e.g. siblings going through a messy divorce can stay longer, and if so, what are the exceptions and how much longer can they stay? What would we do if a family member can no longer live independently? What counts as infidelity? Actively messaging someone and spending a lot of time with them? Kissing? What should we do if one/both of us is no longer in love? Definitely go through those sorts of questions with each other, especially the finances part. It's not romantic but so many people divorce over finances.